We're going to take a look at Hosea chapter 13, verse 14 this morning. And welcome to Morning Manna. It says, I will ransom them from the power of the grave. This is God speaking. And the context here is Hosea is prophesying about the impending destruction of Israel, and talking about how Assyria is coming from the east to bring judgment and wrath on them as a nation. But then right in the middle of this forecast, God speaks up and he says, I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be your plagues. O grave, I will be your destruction. Pity is hidden from my eyes. And it's just a wonderful little insert there. Speaking of right in the middle of destruction, God speaks hope. God speaks redemption. He is a redeeming God. And we are actually this is speaking of Assyria coming and against Israel, and that's the context there. So it's a particular historical context, but then it's also speaking of a millennial context where during the millennial reign, God is going to um, deal with death and Satan. But then there's another layer that Paul brings, and that's speaking of the church and how God is bringing not it's more of this spiritual resurrection and for the church. Okay, so the application in 1 Corinthians 15:55, he brings that up. O death, where is your sting? And so we can apply this as well to the church in addition to Israel. And I love this because it's like God trash talking death, God trash talking Satan. You see, Satan is potent, he is powerful. So when we come against Satan, we are less than. We come against a foe who is more powerful than us. But we have a God who is omnipotent, meaning all powerful. He is the creator, even the creator of Lucifer. And he is all powerful versus powerful. And so we don't have this yin yang where we have evil is equal to good, and they just are in this perpetual eternal fight to balance out, this yin and this yang, the good, the bad, just kind of fighting perpetually forever, not one winning over the other, but just given 1-2 punches back and forth. But we have a God who is greater than, far greater than, because the potter says to the clay, I'm your master, not the other way around. The clay doesn't consider himself equal to the potter. Rather, there's a big gap, fathomable gap there. And we have a God who's really trash talking death itself. Now, you might say, well, is it death or is it Satan? Make up your mind, Matt. Well, Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15 say this. Inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, speaking of Jesus, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and release those who, through fear of death, were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Okay, so we have death personified in the person of the devil. And so that's why I can say that God is really trash talking Satan here, saying, hey, you think you are bringing plagues? I'm going to be your plague, death. You think you can bring pestilence and COVID-19? I'm going to be your COVID-19, says the Lord. And then he says, oh, grave, I will be your destruction. Now, this is the only time that the word in Hebrew is used in the Old Testament, destruction, the word we translate there. And And that's quite interesting. Of all of the times where you would want some sort of annihilation of something, where do we see that showing up? We see that God speaking to death. And what a cool thing that is. God doesn't annihilate us. He doesn't annihilate the redeemed, and he doesn't annihilate the unredeemed. We are made in his image. We are made for eternity, and it's up to you and I to allow to make the choice. Do we allow God to redeem us, to do the heavy lifting? Do we allow God to defeat death for us? Or do we want to stand before God under his judgment and wrath towards death and towards sin, which causes death, and on our own merit try to overcome death? That's really our choice. And that's the big choice in life, is do you want to stand on your own merit, or do you want to let God do that for you? Well, spoiler alert, you can't measure up. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And the wages of sin is death, and all have sinned. So there is no winning if you are to stand before God on your own merit. The only way that you can qualify for eternity with God is to let him do it for you. And so thanks be to God that he made a way for us. Thanks be to God that he offers that way to you today. And thanks be to God that if you have indeed taken up that hope, that resurrection life by faith in Jesus Christ, that you have a sure thing when it comes to eternity, a resurrection hope bought at a great price by Jesus Christ, who shed his blood for you, who had his body in the grave for you, and who rose again as a down payment, as a deposit, as a guarantee that he can raise you from the dead. So be blessed today, knowing that you have an eternal hope, and that the days that we live in, these days of pestilence and sickness, that God is going to bring, he's going to bring sickness and destruction to death. And I like that thought. So be blessed, and until next time on Morning Manna.